ANC Study Group on the Ad Hoc Committee probing the allegations raised by Lieutenant-General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has condemned what it calls attacks on National Assembly Speaker Thoko Didiza. Now, this comes in light of unhappiness by some committee members about the decisions given by this, in fact, the reasons given by the Speaker not to issue summons against O'Sullivan and Mogotsi. And some of these reasons include the Speaker saying that she wants to actually be sure that the committee did, in fact, delve deeper into the reasons that are given by the two gentlemen. We do now have the ANC's Chief Whip and member of that Ad Hoc Committee, Mdumiseni Ntuli. A very good evening to you, Mr. Ntuli, and thank you so much for your time. So when one was listening to the meeting on Monday, when the responses by the Speaker were read by the legal team in that particular meeting, she says the committee failed to provide proof that it had meaningfully engaged with these concerns raised by these two gentlemen. But you do have some of the MPs who are not convinced by this particular argument, and it has led to some of what has been said publicly. You are viewing these as attacks against her. Why?
No, thanks, Bongi. Good evening to you and good evening to the viewers. Look, the problem here is that there are people who have adopted positions without fully educating themselves about the response that is provided by the Speaker. The Speaker has outlined three fundamental issues in which she says we don't seem to have taken them into consideration. The first one is that in the case of Mr. O'Sullivan, he says to us, because of security and some intelligence information he has acquired, there is a real threat to his life and he might be murdered if he comes back to South Africa. So the first thing that we have to do when you see it, you respond to a statement like that, is to give an elaborate explanation how you intend to secure him in order to mitigate against that very same threat that is going to be murdered when he lands in South Africa. The second one is that he says to us, please consider an option of meeting with me on a virtual platform. We must deal with that issue as well and explain that we have taken a decision at the committee that none of the witnesses appearing before us are going to engage with the committee directly on a virtual platform. The third one is that he says, in any case, I am prepared to travel to any of South Africa's embassies elsewhere in the world. And that is obviously a South African land. Once you get into a South African embassy, you are directed and controlled by the laws of the Republic of South Africa. Now, the Speaker says to us, have you engaged with this? You have not engaged with these matters in detail, because, and I'm sure the Speaker is raising those matters, Bongiwe, because at the back of her mind, and it's a view that I also hold, is that the battle we are waging between ourselves and Mr. O'Sullivan is likely to land in court. And if and when that happens, we should not be found wanting when the court makes a judgment that you have actually not effectively discharged your responsibilities as a committee of parliament to ensure that indeed there were no other option except to subpoena Mr. Polo.
Two questions arise from what you're saying, right? Because when one was listening to the meeting, for example, your fellow comrade in the ANC, the Honorable Nhlanhla, does not seem to agree with the Speaker that the merits of these arguments were not, in fact, dealt with within the committee. He's not the only one. There are various other committee members who feel that they have sufficiently dealt with this particular issue. So are you saying that where you are sitting, you as a committee failed to deal with these issues effectively? That's why the Speaker is sending it back to you guys.
You see, Bongiwa, I don't know how many of us, except the chairperson of the committee and probably myself and the whip of the ANC of that committee, which is Comrade Kusela Sangonitigo. I don't know how many of us, beyond the three of us, have taken trouble to look at the letter that the legal team that is supporting the Ad Hoc Committee had prepared for the chairperson to sign as a response to Mr. O'Sullivan. If you have read that letter and you have read it with a capacity to understand what it says, you would not have a difficulty to identify the shortcomings as were lifted up to us by the Speaker in her response to the committee. So I'm quite certain that I think the Speaker is not opposed to what we want to do, but she wants us to adhere to processes such that our own decisions will also be safeguarded in law in an event that the matter ends in court.
Would you be able to share that letter with us? Is it a possibility?
Sure. I'm sure the chairperson of the portfolio committee, Comrade O'Sullivan and Mogotsi, can make that letter.
Okay.
But you'll see for yourself that this letter has not adequately, in detail, responded to some of the issues that Mr. O'Sullivan is raising.
I suppose then someone like Leanne Matthys from the EFF would then be vindicated because she did raise concerns about the legal team and how they did not capsulate this issue effectively. But let's pause that for a second. Did it have to take the Speaker months to respond to that? Because there is a concern that she was given this letter last year and now replies on the eve of the work of the committee closing. Did she have to take this long to tell you to go back to the drawing board?
Let me explain what I understand. We wrote a letter to the Speaker last year. I think towards the end of the year, maybe late November or early December. I'm not sure exactly what time, when was it last year. But when we were corresponding with the Speaker also has to await a response that must come from Mr. O'Sullivan. Now, the first response from Mr. O'Sullivan was around the 2nd, if not the 4th of December. I think the second response, when he was responding to our own response to him, is the one that came either late December, if not early January. As a consequence of which, then the Speaker, when we gave him a report that we have taken a decision to subpoena this man to appear before us because he's treating Parliament with contempt. I'm quite certain he's likely to be a person who's very racist, who have no regard for African people, let alone the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. So there's unanimity amongst us that we can't allow this man to escape accountability. But that we must adhere to processes. We can't, when we're members of Parliament, not adhere to our own laws and our own processes. I don't think that there's been an undue delay. We've got to read the letters that were in exchanges between ourselves and the Ad Hoc Committee, which would have later triggered the response of the Speaker. The argument that the Speaker only responded this year on a matter that was raised last year is misdirected. Those letters, I'm going to engage the chair to make them available to the media so that you know what was the interaction and the time at which it was taking place, as a consequence of which then the Speaker had to intervene when the matter is before our own table.
And in fact, as we speak right now, someone from the Speaker's office just sent these letters to myself, and I will then be engaging with them. But this is not the first time, right? On the optics of it, I'm sure you've seen in the public domain what has been said. This is not the first time that the ANC is finding itself with questions around its own member who happens to be a Speaker of the National Assembly. We saw this, for example, during the tenure of former President Jacob Zuma and that pay back the money. We now have that Phala matter that is currently in court. The Speaker also being accused of, shielding the President from accountability. And I want us to look at some of what our viewers are saying tonight about this very issue, because we're asking them, and I need your response in just a moment. So if we're able to bring up those tweets, and in order for us to be able to just engage with some of what is being said about this very letter. Habone was saying both witnesses have cited serious safety fears, with Paul O'Sullivan reportedly abroad and Mogotsi alleging a prior attempt on his life, forcing them into a public space could jeopardize their safety, which is a key factor in the Speaker's refusal to immediately approve subpoenas. Siabula saying, good afternoon, my dear beautiful friends. Hi, as an in-person interview is more preferable when dealing with such, but if there's a real concern, we'll have to consider virtual options. We know how the system has failed to protect its citizens when it matters most. One dealer saying Paul O'Sullivan and others must present themselves physically, and the Speaker of Parliament, Ms. Thoko Didiza, should ensure that security is beefed up so as to prove beyond reasonable doubt that there's no biasness without fear or favor. And Mr. Ntuli, I suppose that particular last tweet, you heard the mixed reaction. Some understand, but the last tweet is where some are actually looking at to say, in the past, they've seen what appears to be, or even accusations of speakers being accused of shielding their own comrades, and are worried that this could be something that's happening again. How do you respond to that?
Bongiwe and the viewers, let me just make this point. I'm both the Chief Whip of the ANC and a member of the Ad Hoc Committee. And I'm admitting to you that the way in which the Ad Hoc Committee itself, in terms of the actual correspondence that went out, remember, there's a distinction between a political discussion in the committee and a decision. But there's another process which we're not in control of as a committee, where the legal team must prepare a letter for the chairperson to sign and send out. Now, if we pick up shortcomings in that letter, you can't blame the Speaker for advising us to follow the correct procedure. And I'm saying to you, I would be the first to take a responsibility because I'm a member of that committee, but I'm equally the Chief Whip of the African National Congress. This accusation that the Speaker may be acting in a way that others in the past might have done, which were deemed by certain people not being in the best interest of the Republic of South Africa, is in this case completely misguided. If we were to follow a process other than what the Speaker has said, I can tell you, when Mr. Mogotsi and Mr. O'Sullivan decide to take us to court, we're going to be an embarrassment in that court. And I don't think that we should fail to accept responsibility as a committee and begin to appropriate those problems and weaknesses to the office of the Speaker. It's an unjustified attack on the Speaker. And I understand why the political parties are doing that, especially those who are not even in the government of national unity. It is their own responsibility to always find faults and undermine the authority of the Republic, whether it's the President or the Speaker of the National Assembly. But in this case, I was going to be the first to say the Speaker is wrong if there was evidence to that effect. But I'm a member of a committee that has not fully discharged its responsibility in terms of the detailed letter that went out to Mr. O'Sullivan. Why would I then stand up and blame the Speaker? We can't do that. The Speaker has not done anything wrong in this case.
Mr. Ntuli, I appreciate your time. I suppose the next stop now becomes the chairperson of the committee, and what then will he be doing with this particular issue, especially because you're not the only one raising concerns about the legal team and what it may or may not have done here when it comes to this particular issue. We've heard it even being ventilated within the committee by other political party members. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Appreciate it. That was the ANC Chief Whip and member of the Ad Hoc Committee, Mdumiseni Ntuli. And I suppose now the chairperson will have to say what are they going to be doing with some of the, the concerns around the legal team in and itself, as far as some of the issues are concerned. But a lot more to be said about this particular story.